Truly, it was just bad luck, Jeremy. I had a mother that was horse crazy, a sister that was horse crazy. I was 10 years old, and my mother pulls me aside and says, "I bought your little sister a pony, but you're going to have to ride it until she gets big enough." And that was kind of the start. I don't know that I've ever liked horses. It was just something that I was kind of thrown into. First experience with a pony, it was sort of jaundiced my opinion of ponies for the rest of my life. I think I believe ponies are a vexation to the spirit. They're a pox on humanity. The first little pony we had was a little Welsh mountain, and you'd get on it and it'd buck you off. You'd get back on, it'd take you and rub you off through the trees. You'd get back on, it'd take you and dump you off in the slough. And there I was, 10 years old as a pony club kid, having to ride off to weekly lessons wearing the stretchy pants, and that was soul totally nothing of who and what I was, but kind of grew up that way. One horse led to a couple dozen, and of course we couldn't afford the horseshoer. Horseshoers are rape and pillage artists, so I was always the snotty-nosed kid tugging on the shirt tails of anybody that came out to work on our horses, and I eventually started working on our own horses. And I was encouraged to seek higher education. I went. One of our fellows that used to shoe for us was a guy named Don Wenham, and Don Wenham was the founder of the World Championship Blacksmith Competition. I had a personal connection to him before because I used to deliver papers as a kid on his doorstep, and he was married into the Pratt family, and the Pratt family was a local Calgary ranching family. They raised Arab horses, but the patriarch of the family, Bill Pratt, was also the general manager of the Calgary Stampede at that time. So Don had married into a sort of an influential family, and I wound up taking pony club lessons over at the Pratt place. So there was a whole lot of sort of symbiotic things that were happening at that time, and I sort of fell into that sphere. It was hanging over the fence at the very second World Championship Blacksmith competition in 1981 that prompted me to want to go to shoeing school. I had a bit of an overview that there was a whole lot more to this than met the eye, so I went to Olds College, and when I came out, at that time the Olds College had a 4-month program, and I graduated and discovered how much I didn't know, and decided that I was going to go work for somebody, and I was just fortunate enough that it was Don Wenham that I wound up apprenticing with for 5 years. And at that time, Don was the big wheel in Calgary. He was the top of his ball game. He shod the lion's share of all the hunter jumper, the performance horses, the reining horses. He had quite a diverse shoeing portfolio, so I was exposed to the top end of our local marketplace at that time. So I had a very fortunate learning experience, and because of that, I also ended up being conscripted as a volunteer into the Stampede system and the World Championship Blacksmith competition, and it's just evolved from there. I've had the contest started in 1980, and I guess my first exposure to it was in 81. I started helping out slinging buckets and running stuff around in 82, 83. So I've seen the progression of the contest from its humble beginnings to what it is today, and this is our 35th anniversary for it, and it is I think one of the very best things that we've done in the industry as far as promoting and affecting a change in the education of the shoer globally. I've seen the trickle down. It's been huge. The fact that we have world champions, 35 years worth of world champions, giving clinics to horseshoers all over the world, improving hoof care globally. I think that's been a really cool deal, and I've been lucky enough to be a part of that. It's one of the things that I encourage everybody that comes to work for me is to expose yourself to as many different opportunities, as many different types of shoeing, because the width and the breadth of the industry has changed so dramatically. When I started shoeing, there was, in Alberta at that time, 35 years ago, nobody had a fire. There was no connection to hot shoeing, drawing a clip. I was a pony club kid. I was into show jumping and 3-day eventing, and at that time you could not find somebody to put draw a clip or put cork holes on your horse's shoes. It was kind of a struggle getting somebody to shoe your horse. It was very I don't want to say Western, but it was very rural, and I would imagine that same example is replicated all over North America. I mean, we're actually a fairly young culture. You know, the way that its shoeing has evolved over the last couple of centuries has been more of a need and necessity, more of that pioneer type of thing. You did it because you had to, not because it was a specialty. And I'll never forget the first time I ever saw somebody draw a clip on a shoe, and it was a fellow who had come out in a little old 71 red Chevy van, and he had a little oxyacetylene unit, little jeweler's deal, and he'd heat up a little bit of the shoe and work away at it, and it was pretty primitive by today's standards, but got it done. I remember the first time I saw somebody drill a cork hole in a shoe for to be tapped. Buddy held it by a pair of vice grips, and it held it on a 2x4 and used a hand drill, and it was pretty primitive. But that was sort of the beginning of the change. And Don Wenham, the fellow I worked with at the time, had been exposed to, I believe it was probably an AFA convention, and he understood that there was a bigger opportunity out there than what was happening in Alberta at the time. He himself had grown up around Edmonton, and he had apprenticed or worked with an old German fellow who had some traditional European type of training, and so he had an exposure to the fire and understood that there was more to horseshoeing than just banging on cold shoes. Carl Goldgrave, the old German fellow that he worked for, had another old German fellow who had taught him. So the trickle down to using the fire came from this old German fellow named Martin Schultz to Carl Goldgrave to Don Wenham to myself, and through that there's been a sort of a minor renaissance period in Alberta with pushing and promoting clinics, continuing education, and contests. Don was one of the first guys to gather a group of shoers together socially, just to break down some barriers, because 35 years ago, if you pulled into a barn and somebody else was working, they'd pack up their tools and leave, because there was that competitive, don't want to show your secrets bullshit that it was kind of prevalent at the time. And Don was instrumental in creating an atmosphere where he said, let's work together, let's get somebody in from somewhere else that knows something more than we do. I think one of the first clinics that he'd put on locally in Calgary was an Arab gaited horseshoer named Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown was sort of the guru godfather of the Arabian industry back in the day, and one of Don's accounts was an Arab horse barn that there was a lot of money at, and he wanted to learn more about it, and so Charlie came along and put on a bit of a clinic, and that really brought a whole new level of awareness to the local scene. And that started to escalate when guys like Gordon Haidt from California would come up. Bob Marshall, who was the first world champion in 1980, an Englishman that was living on the west coast of British Columbia, and he came out and opened up a whole new world, something different that the local guys had never seen before, and that was somebody that was really handy in a coal fire, had some traditional skill sets, and sort of set the stage for everything that's happened since then. So it was a watermark kind of era in that there was a whole lot of change. There was some guys were obviously looking for more information. They were looking to learn more, and it was a pretty unique environment that sort of fomented a lot of that change. Probably the underlying driver of change is competition, whether it's in your personal life, your business life, your just the marketplace. And so not wanting somebody else, your business competitor, to maybe get a leg up on you or have more knowledge than you, or wanting to keep pace, I think is a huge driver. I mean, we're all, we come into this world competing, fighting for breath. It's competition it's an evolutionary thing. You have to evolve or die, and I think our trade is no different. We have basically been effectively doing the same chore, the same job for 1,700 years. It hasn't really changed that much, but the little things have evolved, and I believe absolutely in the value of competition, whether it's in your daily life. It's one of the biggest drivers of change, and I think the other big driver of change is education. So I think the two things go hand in hand. It's evolutionary. It's competition and education. I don't know that you can split the two of them up. Yeah, absolutely. I believe that everybody has an ego. Everybody seeks validation in different ways, and I think that having a little bit of personal pride in what you do is it's not narcissistic. I think it's something that everybody wants to have a little show and tell. They want people to know that they've made a difference or made a mark. I believe those are the people that have affected change. They do that. There's lots of people that have a Peter principle. They rise to their own level of incompetence, and we see that manifested daily throughout all walks of life, all professions. Everybody gets stuck in a rut. But I think when you have industry people or your peer groups pushing you to improve or get better, whether it's through direct competition or implied, then I think that's healthy. When it becomes unhealthy is when you have the out of control marketplace factors, the undercutting, the bad mouthing, all of those negative things that come along, and a lot of that gets weeded out, I think, by just by good work. I heard a phenomenal quote the other day, and it was a discussion in the bar between a couple of guys about somebody lost a client to somebody else, and there was hurt feelings and this and that, and the statement was that no one has ever lost work to a satisfied customer. Yeah, or because of a satisfied customer. I'm quoting it wrong, but it struck me so true. In that, if you run your business well and you keep your people happy and you keep your horses healthy, and things generally work out for themselves. Again, we see that manifested in all walks of life and all different trades. I think there is one of the big eveners or levelers in our industry is the horse. It comes down to that. And one of the cool things that I've seen evolve over the years is the guys actually starting to work together, the teamwork stuff. I know when I started, I was the very first guy in my area that ever went to work for somebody in an actual apprenticeship. Over in Europe and England, I mean, it's always been considered a trade. They have a history and a culture for that generational passing on of the knowledge and treating it as a trade, having masters and apprentices, so it's not strange to them, but it sure was strange over here, just even the concept of guys working together. And I believe that that is so integral to the preservation of our trade is teamwork and guys working together. I've seen it for years, and I know that the model works. Everybody only has so many horses in their back, you know. So if you can sub out some of the labor work, whether it's just the flooring, the pulling, the clinching, the stuff that's labor intensive, that doesn't require a high skill level, that you will effectively double the number of horses that you can do in your life. Plus, it's a much safer environment, and good labor doesn't cost you money; it makes you money. And I think a lot of people are starting to understand that, and when they see the value of having and being able to mentor and teach and help and foster new people coming into the trade, I think that's one of the very best things that we can do to not only preserve the integrity and the history, but the health and well-being of our trade. I absolutely firmly believe that. First memories of the very beginning, first and foremost, Bob Marshall, the English invasion. You know, I didn't have a real valid point of reference, but because it was kind of after the Beatles. But you know, here was, you know, Bob Marshall was kind of and the Dave Ducketts, they were kind of the rock star heroes of the day. They were brought something to the game that nobody had ever seen. Bruce Daniels, very first contest, 1980. It was 11 guys. There was that core group of local Calgary Farriers, but then there was Bob Marshall, there was Bruce Daniels, and Bruce was kind of representing the Team USA type of deal, and he was loud and proud and couldn't believe that, you know, who are we to call it a world championship, blah blah blah, and Bruce was kind of the big dog back then, and he kind of got spanked. He kind of found out where the bear shits in the woods that day, and that was a big eye opener for him. First time meeting David Wilson Sr., who is a personal hero of mine, older Scotsman, and just a phenomenal hand, sixth generation blacksmith. You know, been there, done that. You know, just not fancy. Just this is what he does every day. This is how he does it every day. That was way cool. Yeah, meeting the GE family. Bob Garner's mom, Beth. I remember meeting her very early. Beautiful human being, and they sort of set in motion a company that's provided, you know, world-class tools for a generation that continued to be a industry leader. You know, those things jump out. Conversely, here comes Jay Sharp with a 5-gallon pail full of handmade tools. You know, showing the other end of the scale. You know, that launched another whole sort of sub-industry of handmade tools. Probably more pushing the art and the traditional side of the equation. You know, he was truly a blacksmith, truly a phenomenal tool maker. And if Jay could have ever have seen his way past himself to have people work for him that could stand and be around him for more than 5 minutes, he might have retired a rich man, you know, instead of a starving old artist, you know. Grant Moon, the first time I met Grant Moon, you know, Grant and I have had kind of a adversarial headbutting relationship for 30 plus years, you know, and we have this sort of weird connection that we've had a roller coaster of emotions and experiences, and I would consider Grant to be probably one of the most hardcore competitors of any sport that I've ever seen in my life. He's a force of nature unto himself, and when he first showed up, it was with another bunch of young guns, another British invasion. It was the next generation. Dave Duckett was one of Grant Moon and Billy Crothers' mentors. You know, here's another generation of these young guys, and they set the world on fire. It was Carl Bettison, Grant Moon, Billy Crothers, and they showed up and they were just pups. I was a pup back then too, but I didn't have an overview. I was just riding the wave along with all of them. So that was really cool to me. You know, seeing the Mustad family. You know, when they first came along in 1982, that was the first year that they showed up at Calgary Stampede, and it was more of a social thing. You know, they were wined and dined and treated like royalty, and they came for a party. It was a big, you know, it was a big social thing for them, and that was sort of set the tone and the stage for the, you know, sort of the first half of the World Championship Blacksmith competition's experience. It was very much it was a family-run contest. It was supported by another great family, and that's the Mustad family. It was a lot of familial connections, and yeah, there's just I've got a kaleidoscope of faces and images that I can process. They're all unique. Edward Martin, the first time I met Edward Martin, and Dr. I think it was Dr. Aoki, Japanese fellow that came along, and they had one of their first World Farrier Association meetings in Bill Pratt's back room. You know, they came along for a little show and tell and little kick some tires, and that was the very first exposure I had to Edward Martin, and understood that there was another whole big world out there. You know, I'd heard stories and the man, the myth, the legend, and it wasn't until meeting Edward face to face at Jay Sharp's place quite a few later that I got some up close personal time with Edward, and he chewed my ass the first time I had some FaceTime with him. You know, he took me to school hard, and I'll never forget that. And, at that time, we had introduced a pool of shoes into the contest, and they were all hard forging classes, very you know, sort of forging exercises. They might not have been very good usable shoes. They were more exercises than they were you know, everyday working kind of things. And Edward said, you know, there's no point in building a shoe if it's not going to go on a horse's foot. And he said, most of these shoes are just nonsense. I said, you're wasting people's time, absolutely wasting people's time. Why would you ever build that shoe? And like he took me to task, and I'll never forget that. And I was phenomenally fortunate to be a part of that first weekend that Edward and Jay had together. They were fast friends, and I've got so many stories about those two that yeah, it's just wild. But class individual, absolutely a leader in our industry. It made a phenomenal difference to so many different people, both those gentlemen, and I was lucky to have known them and spent the time I did with both of them. So, yeah, those are the, you know, just the bare minimum highlights. I mean, I've been phenomenally fortunate. I've had a front row seat. I've had the best seat in the house for 30 years, to more than 30 years, for something that's had a phenomenal global impact. So yeah, I've got an education I couldn't have paid for. This is the 35th anniversary for the World Championship Blacksmith Competition, and it is unfortunately its time on Stampede Park has ended. Calgary Stampede is going through a bunch of revisioning for the future, and they've decided that they would like to see a different representation of horseshoeing and blacksmithing on Stampede Park. They don't want to see a contest represented anymore. They would like to see a 10-day demonstration, and that's fair enough from their perspective. Their needs would be far better served from that, but I think it probably speaks to a bigger conversation about, you know, where our world is going. I mean, obviously the visual of putting hot shoes on horses' feet, you know, terrifies some people. That medieval look of driving nails into their feet, it terrifies some people. You know, the concept of using horses for work or sport terrifies some people. I think Stampede is probably capitulated a little too much to the vocal minority that stresses out about things that they really have no valid point of reference for. You know, and from their perspective, they're always fighting that battle between public perception and around all of their livestock issues, whether it's the chuck wagon racing or the heavy horse pulls or even putting shoes on horses' feet. So it's had its time and its day on Stampede Park, and I think that I believe that the contest has value. I think it's going to live and breathe somewhere else in the world. I think it's a phenomenal opportunity for us to revision and repurpose what we do. I think that there's a phenomenal chance for us to be able to take what we do and showcase it somewhere else in the world, somewhere there's a horse audience, a horse-owning public audience, and I think that we can use our world champions, you know, and showcase what they can do, what the very best in the world can do in regards to hoof care. You know, I've often felt, and I so totally believe, that we have to quit defending what we do as a necessary evil and start promoting it as a value-added alternative to pain and suffering. You know, we seem to be, there's so many camps that are vying for control of the message, you know, about who owns the moral high ground on hoof care. You know, and I believe that our trade is not going away. I believe that we have phenomenal value to the horse owning world and to horses, period. I think we are the caretakers of you know, their soundness in a lot of regards. I think that it's such a long standing, proud trade, profession, art, craft, science, whatever name you want to call it. It's all of it, and I'm proud to be a part of it. And if I have anything to say, I would like to see it continue to grow and thrive and be valid. You know, whether it's on Stampede Park or somewhere else in the world. Well, Don's going to hate me to say this, but I make sure that I tell all the guys that come to work for me. I had I wouldn't call it classical apprenticeship. I was basically there to help out. I shoveled more shit and held more horses and swept more floors than I ever did actual physical shoeing in that regard. A lot of times I think I was there as more a sounding board, a companion of sorts. It wasn't necessarily about the shoeing. It was more about having somebody there to help, and it wasn't just the everyday shoeing. It was helping out with the contests and the clinics and getting immersed in the trade. I worked for $10 a day. That was what I got paid, and it sure wasn't much. It barely paid for gas. So for a young guy coming out of school and getting into that, my attitude was I didn't have it before. I was used to starving. Starving is easy, but I also believe starvation is a huge motivator. And so how I survived was, you know, I would trim a couple horses on the way home, or you know, start to develop my business through hand-me-down customers. And by the time I had spent 5 years with Don, he had cycled out of shoeing. He retired from shoeing after the 5 years. I don't know whether I drove him into retirement or it was a personal choice, but he quit shoeing at that time, and it was a very abrupt retirement. He just didn't show up for work one day. He was dealing with some personal stuff, and he just quit. And so all of his expanded business sort of fell into my lap at that time, and it was a sink or swim kind of deal. I ended up only keeping half of the work that fell into my lap. I was still a kid. I was still quite wet behind the ears as far as the trainers were concerned. I think there is always a quickening or a proving of yourself. If you've always worked for or apprentice with somebody, you will always be the hired help. And to be able to establish your own identity, your own book, your own client base, I think you have to step out from underneath the shadow. And so that's what happened with me. And I was fortunate enough to have enough skills at that time to be able to carry on with most of the work. It was also at that time that I went to Jay Sharp's for the very first time. I had known Jay through the World Championships. I'd seen him. I had knowledge of him, but I'd never experienced the man personally in his own setting. And Jay had a little school down in Salmon, Idaho, and he would have a gathering once or twice a year of like-minded guys that would come together and have an intense Jay Sharp experience. So after Don quit, I decided to go and make the journey to go see Jay, and it was like one of those pilgrimages to the man in the mountain type of thing, and that was a watershed moment for me. That was sort of an introduction to another club, another tribe, another group of guys that were all like-minded. We're all young keeners, sort of evolving into our own businesses and the young guns. When I look around the competition floor at the convention today, I see some of those same groups of guys, the keeners, the guys that have the fire and want it, and it kind of takes me back. So it makes me smile, makes me believe in the future, a little bit more. And so that was a big day. The first time I went to Jay's, that was an education and a half. Sort of being away outside of the comfort zone, being in a totally foreign environment, kind of getting tossed into the deep end. Here was, the man, the myth, the legend, and one of the crankiest bastards you'd ever meet in your life. And at that time, he was kind of a hard living kind of guy, and very demanding, scared the shit out of you type of thing. You never knew if it was all real. And I was fortunate because I had the Stampede connection, and Stampede was one of the few places that Jay was really fond of. Jay had actually shod chuck wagon horses at the Calgary Stampede back in the 50s in one of his many different lives. He had a real connection to the Stampede, so there was a fond spot there for him. So he cut me a bunch of slack because I was sort of the face of the Stampede for him. And he also was a major league pain in the ass. And every time he would come up to Calgary, he would sort of call in favors and lean on you quite heavily for rock star style attention. But it was something that was gladly given because he was the master. He also introduced me to a lot of really cool people. I was fortunate enough to go down to Jay's, 6 or 8 different times, and I would always work it in my benefit. I would always go down a day or two earlier and help him set up for the clinic. So he would chew on your ass for a couple of days, but you would always end up getting a lot of personal time with Jay. And then the clinic would happen, and you. Not to be a suckle or a teacher's pet, but I would definitely make it work for myself. I'm one of those people that believes that you steal with your eyes and your ears, and I made sure that they were all beneficial experiences. And the guy was absolutely a very unique human being and a living legend. And towards the end of his life, I took my 16-year-old boy at that time on a road trip to Vegas to go meet somebody who I thought was a pretty cool dude. And for as flawed a human being as he was phenomenally talented, phenomenally generous and prolific, and you use every adjective you want. The guy was a real deal, you know, and the world's a smaller place without him. But he's also left a huge footprint, a huge influence. All you have to do is walk around the convention and see the influence in the tool making, and the you know, if guys don't have some J-sharp tools, they should hunt some down and get them, because they're the real deal. I took all of the lessons that I could from Don, and I plugged them into something that I felt was working for me. At that time, there was a lot of show horses. A lot of guys didn't want to show horses. They didn't like the restrictions of being sort of held captive and of service to high needs, high maintenance customers, because at the end of the day, this is a service business. And if guys have trouble understanding that, they generally have troubles maintaining and keeping clients. So I deliberately invested a lot of time and effort in developing the show horse clientele, and that's hunters and jumpers. And you know, I'd probably look after 400 head in my rotation, and 80% of those would be hunters and jumpers, because that's where the money is. Calgary's got a huge hunter-jumper population. Spruce Meadows is a big international show park, and I'd actually started my shoeing career at Spruce Meadows with Don. I got stuck doing mares and foals, trimming mares and foals there 30 years ago, and I worked at Spruce Meadows for 25 years, and I developed my business to the point where I was able to shoe some really nice horses for some decent money, and that was you know, something that was deliberate and thought out, and it's still true to this day. That's the bulk of my business, and it's allowed me to look after my family and have a decent quality of life, and most of my work is centered very close to, you know, where I live. So I have a couple of volume accounts that are you know, a bit of a distant drive, but they're sort of the bread and butter. Those are the consistent accounts that kind of keep you in the game, that you know, you pull up with a couple of guys and you're able to run a fairly large herd and make some decent money, and it's not to discount it as lowbrow work, but it's to me, it's what I call the bread and butter. You need to have more than one type of situation to look after. I think, you know, there's some guys that get very either breed specific or sport specific, and you kind of wind up putting all your eggs in one basket, and it, you know, it can be tough on them when things can change. You know, barns come and go. Situations, horse trainers come and go. You know, and if all you have is one, you know, one tool in your toolbox, and that, you know, that goes away the dodo, then you wind up, you know, struggling. And I've always attempted to keep a little bit of diversity in my portfolio. I shoe a lot of draft horses, or more than most 10 guys, and they're working draft horses, and that's sort of one of my I wouldn't call it a hobby. It's definitely not a hobby, but it's something I take some pride and pleasure in, because there's not a lot of guys that like to shoe draft horses. There's not a lot of guys that shoe draft horses well, and it's always been one of the things that I've taken pride with the Stampede. We've generally had a 4-man team draft horse class at the Stampede, and we've always had on Stampede Park generally some sort of world congress of draft horses at any given time. There's always been a draft horse presence on Stampede Park, and it's always been a personal bugbear of mine, because shoeing show draft horses is quite a bit different than shoeing working draft horses, and there's quite a, you know, there's a lot of controversy in show draft horses types and styles and of work that's done on them, you know, almost as much as there is in the gaited horse world, you know. And I've always wanted to put our best foot forward. You know, we have some of the best guys in the world standing around looking at all these poorly shod draft horses thinking, all right, which one of you local assholes did this work? And I've always taken it personal because I shoe a lot of draft horses in my daily life. So I kind of made it a personal mission to have that front and center with our contest. And I know I've seen it personally in our local Calgary area. There's a bunch of young guys that can shoe a draft horse decently, and there's, you know, draft horse owners that see value in having their horses' feet maintained on a regular basis and having quality work done. That puts a smile on my face. And it comes down to ignorance. It's lack of education. It's on both sides of the equation, whether it's owner or shoer. Part of it is the dynamic of the breed. You know, draft horses are a lot of work, and it costs a lot of money to do them. And I don't understand the false economy where a draft horse owner could spend tens of thousands of dollars in harness and rigs and promotion, but not spend a dime on their feet. You know, it's kind of like having a flashy Ferrari with flat tires. You know, it just has never made sense to me at all. And like most human intervention situations, you know, we bastardize the things that we get involved with. You know, you look at you know, they're trying to make draft horses and turn them into gaited horses. You know, well, there's no way that you could take that show draft and put them in a field and actually have them do any kind of work. You know, they just wouldn't last because they're not built and designed for it. Kind of like a French poodle used to be a hunting dog. Well, the only reason you take a French poodle hunting now is for bait. You know, I think it's, you know, those are the kind of the analogies that I use to, you know, try to make sense of it. You know, because it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You know, human intervention has not been kind to animals, and we just keep, you know, bastardizing them, and they do a phenomenal job of surviving in spite of us. I think it's an attitude. You know, I've always said education is where you find it, and I think it's has to be a personal attitude. If you want to improve, you will. You will seek out information, and we're so fortunate. There's such a massive amount of help and information available to us today. It doesn't matter what topic you want to choose. You know, we live in an age and an era where there's a phenomenal amount of information. One of the problems is wading through that information to find the good, the bad, and being able to make those value judgments accordingly. There's organizations like the AFA that are hosting events like this convention that are phenomenal for education. There's organizations like the Farriers Journal that host the Hoof Care Summit, which I believe is one of the most progressive educational opportunities that people can get involved with. All of the distance learning stuff that's online now, that's starting to explode. You look at you know, the Equinets on the interwebs, you know, and it's such a phenomenal amount of information, and so it's out there, and if a person is willing to expand their knowledge base, they're going to find it. They're going to seek people out that can teach them or feed them or mentor them or foster them, and it kind of falls back to that Peter principle thing. I think everybody, you know, looks for their comfort zone. They look for their tribe. They look for their message. They look for the, you know, whatever it is that resonates with them that makes sense to them. You know, we see it with the barefoot world right now. Everybody wants this whole natural, back to nature kind of thing, you know, and it obviously, clearly resonates with a lot of people. I don't know that makes a whole lot of sense in the real world, but it's obviously a part of our world, and it has to be addressed. It has to be dealt with. It has to be accepted as part of our hoof care industry today. and have to be engaged. I think if there's a head-scratching moment for me, it is how easy it is to become an expert today in anything. We see it with horse trainers, we see it with all the alternative stuff, and it's just blossomed. You know, I've seen in my short lifetime the explosion of information and all of the you know, sort of the ancillary stuff that's connected with horses. You know, and it's just amazing to me how, you know, we ever got to where we are today. You know, I mean, you know, when I give talks to 4-H or pony clubs or horse riding clubs, you know, I start off my little preamble with statements like, you know, we used to conquer whole continents on horseback barefoot. You know, now we can't ride them for 20 minutes in a soft dirt arena with shoes on without them being lame. What's the deal? You know, how did we get to where we are today, where we've kind of bastardized the entire experience? You know, and a lot of it is education. So to your question about, you know, where do you find that? It's everywhere. It's everywhere, and you just have to seek it out and never stop learning. I've been going to school at, you know, on the horse's foot for over 30 years. It's a topic that never gets tired or old to me. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. You know, I can discuss horses' feet down to the cellular level with research scientists. You know, that's how engaged I am in the whole process of it. But you lose a whole lot of people along that journey, and I think it's keeping it relevant, keeping it you know, a daily use type of plug in, plug out situation, because everybody wants fast food information. They want to be able to use it, and they want it yesterday for nothing. I have a shirt that has a J Sharp quote on the back of it. It says, "Everybody wants a brass ring, but very few are willing to do the work and able to get to it." Something like that, and it's true. You know, we live in a totally different society today. And the expectations are that, you know, I should be able to look it up online and be able to absorb that knowledge and become an expert overnight. Well, it doesn't happen like that. We have a trade and an industry that requires daily use and attention. You know, if you're not being your own best critic and attempting to improve every day, I think you're doing not only yourself but the horse a disservice. It's basic duality of nature. I think it's two-edged swords. So, you know, it's fantastic on one hand. It sucks badly on the other hand, because again, it's instant validation, and yeah, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm a slow learner. Maybe that's how I process information. But I see it replicated all the time, where, you know, a little bit of knowledge is dangerous, and you know, so often, you know, we get this much of a topic that's this big, you know, and those are the things that we focus on. I think, you know, not just our little world, our little horse world, or little horseshoeing world is complex. I mean, and we're just a microcosm of the bigger picture. So, you know, if we can't figure out the little things in our little sphere of influence, then the trickle down gets lost, and that's why I'm such a believer in continuing education and always looking, asking the questions. And I think it's just pure science. You know, science asks the questions. You know, it doesn't say we have all the answers, but, you know, if you keep on asking them, you're probably gonna continue to go down that road to discovery. My expectations are show up and shut up. I'm probably a terrible boss. You know, I have no feelings. You know, I tell them to park it at the door. I'm a bit of a prick that way, but I'm also a little bit proud of the fact that in the last 30 years I've probably had 35 different people work for me, and out of those 35, there's probably 30 that are still involved in the business and have their own successful businesses, or are still productive members of the industry. So that makes me smile. I would like to think that their takeaway would be having a fairly decent overview of the industry, not just from the physical hand skill part of it, but the exposure to all of the different elements, and probably the most important one is the business side of the equation. You know, a lot of times we sort of get focused on, you know, I want to be the best shoemaker, and we end up losing sight of the bigger picture, which is, you know, feeding your family and having a decent life. You know, we all get a little breed blind or dug into, you know, our personal passions, and we kind of miss the bigger picture. And I know that's been my situation. I've probably, you know, sacrificed time, money, and effort that my family's had to not benefit from, and I've given it to the industry. If there was an inverse proportion thing I could take back, I'd probably do that. But you know, I wouldn't be sitting here today. So
it's a common problem.
It's not just. I think it's a fact of the human condition. You know, doctors, lawyers, you know, the professional people all over the world. Everybody's, you know, pushing a rock up the hill. You know, I think it's, you know, finding your own balance in your own universe. I think that's the, you know, probably key to success. If I was going to tell my hired help anything, if they took away anything, it would be to find that kind of balance. You know, you have to, you know, not just support your passion. You got to support your life. You got to support your family. You have to find that balance. And I wish, you know, I would have had more of that instruction early on. I wish I would have had more instruction on how to be a better business person. You know, might have made a difference, you know, to my life path. But your initial question, what do I expect from my hired help? I expect them to work. I expect them to show up and learn. I expect them to be progressive, you know, polite, and have an open mind. But other than that, they can park their personal issues at home and just get in, shut up, and hold on. Yeah.